I was sold for a debt I didn't know, and somehow that wasn't the part that scared me most. The clock on the wall blinked 2:07 a.m. in dull red numbers, each second ticking louder than it should have in our tiny apartment, like time itself was holding its breath. I remember the smell first, cheap whiskey and something burnt from the kitchen, the kind of smell that clings to walls and never really leaves. My father stood near the door, shoulders tense, fingers wrapped too tightly around a glass he wasn't drinking from anymore. He had that look again. Not anger, not regret, something emptier, like he had already decided something and was just waiting for it to happen. The knock didn't sound like a knock. It was controlled, precise, the kind of sound that didn't ask for permission. My chest tightened. I knew, before the door even opened, that whatever was on the other side would change everything. He didn't look at me when he turned the handle. Not once. The door opened, and the hallway light spilled in, cutting through the dim room like a blade. 3 men stepped inside, all in dark suits that looked too expensive for a place like this, their presence swallowing the space instantly. The air shifted. Heavy. Controlled. Final. I stayed where I was, standing near the edge of the couch, my fingers curling into the fabric as if it could anchor me. One of them spoke quietly to my father, words I couldn't fully hear, but I didn't need to. I saw the way my father's shoulders dropped. I saw the way he avoided my eyes. And then he said it. Just 2 words. Flat. Empty. Take her. No hesitation. No explanation. Just done. Something inside me should have broken right then. Maybe it did. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even move. I just looked past them, toward the open doorway, where another figure stood outside in the shadow of a black SUV parked under the flickering streetlight. He didn't rush in. He didn't raise his voice. He just stepped forward, slow and deliberate, like the world naturally made space for him. Adrian Volkov. I didn't know his name yet, but I felt it. Power doesn't need introduction. It announces itself in silence. He was tall, composed, dressed in a tailored coat that fit him like it. Was made for control, not warmth. His eyes found me instantly. Not scanning. Not judging. Just seeing. Really seeing. And for the first time that night, something shifted. Not fear. Something sharper. Awareness. He studied me for a moment that felt longer than it should have. Like he was measuring something no one else could see. Then one of the men reached for my arm. Not rough. Just certain. And that's when Adrian spoke. Don't touch her. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The man stopped immediately, like the command had weight behind it. The room went still. Even my father looked up, confused. That wasn't how this was supposed to go. I felt it too. The script had changed, and no one had warned us. Adrian stepped closer, closing the distance between us with quiet precision. I could hear my own breathing now, shallow, uneven, but I didn't look away. I refused to. If this was the moment my life was being handed over like a transaction, I wasn't going to disappear inside it. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could see the faint scar near his jaw, the way his expression remained calm but not cold, controlled but not empty. His gaze didn't drop. Not once. You're the payment, he said. Simple, direct, final. But there was something else under it. Something I couldn't name. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. I'm not something you can own. The words came out before I could stop them. Stupid, dangerous, but real. The men shifted slightly, tension tightening the air again, but Adrian didn't react the way I expected. He didn't get angry, didn't step closer, didn't threaten. He just watched me, and for a split second, something almost like curiosity flickered in his eyes. Then, barely noticeable, the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. Not quite. We'll see, he said quietly. And just like that, everything I thought I understood about this moment, about him, about what it meant to be taken, started to unravel. The ride was silent, but it was not empty. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears, thick and deliberate, like even the air knew better than to speak. I sat in the back of the black SUV, hands resting on my lap, fingers still, even though my pulse refused to. Slow down. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of gold and white melting into darkness. And for the first time, I realized I was not memorizing the streets. I was leaving them behind. No one sat next to me. No one needed to. The man in the front passenger seat kept his eyes forward, his posture rigid, like his only purpose was to exist between me and the world outside. And Adrian sat across from me, not speaking, not moving, just watching. Not constantly, not obviously, but every time I looked up, his gaze was already there, like he had never looked away in the first place. I shifted slightly, the leather seat cool beneath me, and turned my head toward the window again. I refused to ask questions, refused to give him anything that looked like fear. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt different in that car. Slower, heavier. Then his voice cut through the silence. You did not cry. I blinked, the words catching me off guard, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Not accusing, not impressed, just observant. I kept my eyes on the window. Was I supposed to? A pause. Subtle. Measured. Most people do. I let out a quiet breath, watching my reflection faintly ripple in the glass. Then you chose the wrong person. The air shifted again. I felt it before I saw it. When I turned my head, he was leaning back slightly, one arm resting along the edge of the seat, his expression unchanged, but his eyes sharper now. Interested? No, he said calmly. I do not think I did. Something about that answer settled under my skin, not like fear, not like comfort. Something else. Something I did not understand yet. The car slowed, then turned, tires crunching softly over gravel, and I straightened without thinking. The gates appeared out of nowhere, tall iron bars sliding open without a sound, revealing a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed trees, each one spaced like it had been measured down to the inch. Control. Everything about this place whispered control. The house came into view slowly, not flashy, not excessive, just undeniable. Large. Imposing. The kind of place that did not need to prove anything, because it already had everything. The car stopped, and for a moment, no one moved. Then the driver stepped out, opening my door without a word. Cool night air rushed in, brushing against my skin, grounding me in a way the car had not. I stepped out on my own, not waiting for help, my shoes pressing against smooth stone as I looked up at the building in front of me. This was real. This was happening. I expected him to follow immediately, to take control of the moment the way he had taken control of everything else, but he did not. Instead, he stepped out on the other side, unhurried, giving me just enough space to feel like I was choosing to walk forward. I did not thank him. I did not look at him. I just walked. Inside, the house was quiet. Not empty. Never empty. I could feel people there, somewhere beyond the walls, but they did not intrude. The floors were polished, the lighting soft, everything arranged with a precision that felt almost intentional enough to be a message. You are here. You are safe. You are watched. A woman approached, dressed simply but elegantly, her expression neutral, professional. Miss Carter, she said gently, and the sound of my name in this place felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. Your room is ready. I hesitated. Not because I was unsure, because I wanted to see what he would do. Adrian stood a few steps behind me, hands in his coat pockets, his presence steady, unwavering. Go, he said quietly. Not an order. Not quite. But enough. I followed her down a long hallway, my footsteps soft against the floor, my mind racing in a way my body refused to show. The room she opened was larger than our entire apartment. Clean. Bright. A bed that looked untouched. A window overlooking the dark stretch of land beyond the gates. I stepped inside slowly, taking it in, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. If you need anything, she said, someone will be outside. Outside. Not inside. Not with me. The door closed gently behind her, and just like that, I was alone. Completely. I stood there for a long moment, listening. No locks clicking. No footsteps lingering. Nothing. I moved to the window, my reflection staring back at me in the glass, eyes sharper than I remembered, something unspoken sitting just beneath the surface. He did not touch me. He did not threaten me. He did not even explain. And somehow that was worse. Because now I had to ask myself a question I was not ready to answer. If I was not here as something he owned, then why was I here at all? Morning did not arrive the way it used to. There was no noise from the street, no distant sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just silence. Clean. Controlled. It woke me before the light did. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft gray glow filtering through the curtains, and for a second, I did not remember where I was. Then I moved. The sheets were too smooth. The air too still. Reality settled back in, quiet but undeniable. I sat up, the unfamiliar bed shifting beneath me, and listened. Nothing. No footsteps outside the door. No voices. No sign that anyone was waiting for me to wake up. It felt wrong. I swung my legs over the side, my bare feet touching the cold floor, grounding me as I stood. The room was exactly the same as I had left it. Untouched. Perfect. Like I had been placed here, not welcomed. I moved toward the door slowly, hesitating for just a second before turning the handle. It opened without resistance. No lock. No barrier. Just a hallway stretching out in both directions, quiet and empty. That was the first thing that did not make sense. If I was meant to stay, why was I not being kept? I stepped out, my movements careful, controlled, as if the house itself was watching. Maybe it was. The hallway seemed longer in the daylight, lined with closed doors and soft lighting that made everything feel distant, like I was walking through someone else's life. I followed the subtle sound of movement, barely there, until it led me to a wide staircase that opened into the main living area. And that is where I saw him. Adrian stood near the far window, sunlight cutting across his profile, turning him into something almost unreal. He was not on a phone, not speaking to anyone, just standing there, looking out like the world beyond the glass belonged to him. He did not turn when I stepped into the room. Not immediately. I could have left. I could have walked back upstairs, pretended I had not seen him, but something kept me there. Maybe it was the way he carried himself. Like nothing surprised him. Like nothing ever could. "You are awake," he said, his voice breaking the silence without raising it. I did not answer right away. I folded my arms slightly, keeping distance between us even as I stood in the same space. It is hard to sleep in a place that does not feel real. He turned then, slowly, his eyes finding mine with that same steady intensity that made it impossible to look away for too long. "Reality is a matter of adjustment," he replied. I almost laughed at that, but it stayed in my chest instead. Is that what this is? An adjustment? His gaze did not shift. For now. The answer should have frustrated me. It should have made me push harder, demand something clearer, something honest. But there was something about the way he said it that made me pause. He was not avoiding the truth. He was choosing how much of it I could handle. I stepped further into the room, ignoring the quiet tension that followed me. "You said I was the payment." I watched him carefully. "But you are not treating me like one." A small pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. "And how should I treat you?" he asked. I shook my head slightly. "Like something you bought." The words felt strange leaving my mouth, but they were real. They had to be. That was the only way this made sense. His expression did not harden, did not change much at all, but something in his eyes shifted, just enough to notice. "I do not buy people," he said calmly. I held his gaze, refusing to let that statement settle without challenge. "That is exactly what you did." Another pause, longer this time. The air between us tightening in a way that felt like a line had been drawn. Then he stepped closer, not fast, not threatening, just enough to make the space between us smaller, more intentional. "Your father made a deal," he said, his voice low, steady. I chose to accept it. I felt my jaw tighten. That is not different. His eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, not to my hands, not to the floor, but to my face, like he was studying something deeper than the words. "It is," he said quietly, "because I can choose what happens next." That stopped me. Not because I believed him, because I did not understand him. I searched his expression, looking for something familiar. Control, power, ownership. But what I found instead was something far more dangerous. Restraint. He could do anything, and he was choosing not to. That realization settled slowly, like something shifting under the surface. I took a small step back, not out of fear, but out of instinct, needing space to think, to breathe. "Then let me go," I said. Simple, direct, the kind of request that should have an immediate answer. But he did not respond right away. He just looked at me, that same steady gaze, like he was weighing something I could not see. "No," he said finally. Not harsh, not cold, just certain. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from the quiet finality in his voice. "Why?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. And for the first time since I met him, something in his expression shifted in a way I could not read. Not control, not calculation, something closer to truth. "Because," he said slowly, "you did not look at me like I was someone to fear." I blinked, the words catching me off guard. "You looked at me like I was something else." He held my gaze, unwavering. And I want to know why. The room fell silent again, but it felt different now. Not controlled. Not empty. Something had changed. Something I could not take back. And standing there, with the morning light stretching between us, I realized something I had not expected. I was not the only one trying to understand what this was becoming. The word no did not echo, but it stayed. It settled into the space between us, quiet and immovable, like it had always been there waiting for me to hear it. I did not argue again. Not right away. Instead, I turned slightly, breaking eye contact first, letting my gaze drift toward the window behind him where the light had shifted just enough to remind me that time was still moving, even if I felt stuck. So that is it? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. I just stay here until you figure me out. I heard the edge in my tone. I did not hide it. He did not seem bothered by it either. You may leave the house, he said calmly. You may walk the grounds. You may speak to the staff. You are not a prisoner. I let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Except I cannot leave. Correct. I turned back to him then, studying his face more carefully this time, searching for something I could push against. Control. Arrogance. Something familiar. But there was only certainty. And something else. Something that made this harder. He believed what he was saying. You think that makes it different, I said. It does. It does not. I replied immediately, my voice sharper now. Freedom with boundaries is not freedom. A pause. Not tense. Not uncomfortable. Just present. He nodded once, like he acknowledged the truth in that, even if it did not change anything. Then perhaps, he said, you should decide what you will do with the space you are given. I stared at him, the words settling in ways I did not expect. He was not trying to convince me, not trying to soften anything. He was placing the choice back in my hands, even if the choices were limited. And that was new. I folded my arms again, not defensive, just grounding. And if I decide to spend that space trying to leave anyway? For the first time, something almost like amusement touched his expression. Subtle, brief, gone before I could be sure it was real. Then I will learn something about you, he said. I shook my head slightly, frustrated now, but not in the way I expected. You talk like this is some kind of experiment. Everything is, he replied simply. That should have made me angry. It should have pushed me into shouting, into demanding, into something loud and clear. But instead, I found myself doing something else entirely. I stepped closer. Not much. Just enough to close the distance I had created earlier. His eyes followed the movement immediately, focused, attentive, but he did not move in return. Then let me make something clear, I said, keeping my voice low, controlled. I am not something you get to study. The air shifted again. Not heavier. Sharper. He looked down at me, not towering, not overwhelming, just present in a way that made everything else feel less important. No, he said quietly. You are not. Another. Pause. Then, softer, almost like he was choosing the words carefully this time. That is why you are still here. I blinked, the statement catching me off guard again. There it was. That same pattern. Every time I thought I understood the direction of this conversation, he moved it somewhere else. Somewhere I could not predict. I stepped back before I could react too quickly, turning away from him again, needing space not from fear, but from the way he made everything feel uncertain. My eyes drifted across the room, taking in details I had ignored before. The way everything was arranged with intention. The quiet precision of it all. Nothing out of place. Nothing accidental. It felt like stepping into a world where mistakes were not allowed to exist. And somehow, I was here anyway. What happens now? I asked, not looking at him this time. You eat, he said. You rest. You decide what you want to do next. I frowned slightly, glancing back at him. That sounds like a schedule. It is a suggestion. I studied him for a moment longer, then shook my head again, softer this time. You are not what I expected. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Honest. Unfiltered. He did not react immediately. Did not take it as a compliment or an insult. He just watched me. Neither are you, he said. Something about that answer lingered longer than it should have. I turned away fully this time, walking toward the dining area I had not noticed earlier, drawn by the quiet presence of something warm, something normal in a place that felt anything but. The table was already set. Not overly formal. Not excessive. Just enough. Like someone had anticipated I would come here eventually. I stopped at the edge of it, my fingers brushing lightly against the back of the chair. I had not realized how hungry I was until that moment. How tired. How human. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting him to still be watching, and he was. Of course he was. But there was no pressure in it. No demand. Just awareness. Like he was giving me the space to choose, but still paying attention to what I chose. I pulled the chair out slowly and sat down, the quiet sound of wood against the floor echoing softly in the room. It felt like a decision. A small one, but real. I reached for the glass of water first, my hand steady as I lifted it, taking a slow sip, letting the simple act ground me in something familiar. Something mine. And as I set the glass back down, I realized something I had not expected to feel. Not safety, not trust, but something close enough to make a difference. He had not taken control away from me. He had just changed the rules. And I was still deciding how to play. The food was simple, but it felt like a test. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. I stared at the plate for a moment longer than necessary, noticing the details I would have ignored anywhere else. Fresh, warm, placed with intention. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Even this, I thought, was part of his control. I picked up the fork slowly, aware of his presence behind me, not close enough to feel, but close enough to matter. I did not turn around. Not yet. I took a bite, the taste grounding me in a way I had not expected. Real. Steady. Mine. It had been a long time since something felt that simple. I swallowed, then took another bite, slower this time, letting the silence stretch without breaking it. If he was waiting for me to speak, he would wait. Minutes passed like that. Quiet. Me eating. Him watching. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just deliberate. Finally, I set the fork down, my fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table as I exhaled. You are still here, I said without turning. Of course. His voice came from the same place, unchanged, like he had not moved at all. I glanced over my shoulder then, just enough to catch sight of him. He stood near the doorway now, one hand resting loosely against the frame, his posture relaxed but not careless. Always aware. Always in control. Do you watch everyone like this? I asked. He did not answer immediately. That pause again. That careful choice. No. I turned more fully in my chair, facing him now, studying the way the light caught the sharp lines of his expression, the way nothing about him felt accidental. Just me. It was not a question. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging it. Yes. Something about hearing it said out loud made the room feel smaller. Not closed in. Focused. Like everything had narrowed down to this one point between us. I leaned back slightly in the chair, folding one arm across my middle. Why? I asked again, quieter this time. Not demanding. Just needing to understand. He stepped forward then, slow, measured, closing part of the distance, but not all of it. Always leaving space. Always leaving room for me to move if I wanted to. Because you are not reacting the way you should, he said. I frowned slightly. According to who? According to everyone I have ever known, he replied. I held his gaze, letting that settle. Maybe your expectations are wrong. Another shift. Subtle. His eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in focus. That is what I am trying to determine. I let out a small breath, shaking my head once. You keep saying that. Like I am something you need to figure out. You are, he said simply. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because it was honest. And honesty, in a place like this, felt rare. And what happens when you do? I asked. When you figure me out? He did not hesitate this time. That depends on what I find. The answer should have unsettled me. Maybe it did, a little, but not in the way it would have before. Not in the way it should have. I stood then, pushing the chair back slowly, the soft scrape against the floor the only sound breaking the quiet. Then I guess I should make it difficult, I said, meeting his eyes again. Something flickered there. Not surprise. Not quite. Something closer to approval. I would expect nothing less. We stood there for a moment, the distance between us unchanged, but the space itself feeling different. Charged. Not with fear. With something sharper. I moved past him then, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking, testing the invisible lines of this place, of him, of whatever this was becoming. He did not stop me. Did not reach for me. Just turned his head slightly as I passed, tracking the movement without interfering. The hallway felt different now. Less like a maze. More like something I could learn. I ran my fingers lightly along the wall as I walked, grounding myself in the physical world, in something solid and real. If this was a game, I needed to understand the rules. And more importantly, I needed to understand him. I reached the end of the hall where a set of glass doors opened to the outside. Sunlight spilled in, bright and clean, stretching across the floor in long lines. I paused, my hand resting on the handle, feeling the cool metal under my fingers. Freedom, in a way. Limited. Controlled. But still there. I pushed the door open, stepping out into the open air, the breeze brushing against my face, lifting a strand of my hair, just enough to remind me I was still here. Still myself. The ground stretched out in front of me, wide and carefully maintained, every detail precise, every line intentional. Nothing wild. Nothing unpredictable. I stepped forward slowly, taking it in, letting the space expand around me, trying to see how far it went, where it ended, what boundaries existed beyond the obvious ones. And then I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just awareness. I turned my head slightly, glancing back toward the house, toward the glass doors. He was there. Of course he was. Standing just inside, one hand in his pocket, the other relaxed at his side, watching me the same way he had watched me at the table. Not stopping me, not calling me back, just observing, giving me space. And somehow, that made everything feel more complicated than if he had simply locked the door. I looked at him for a moment longer, then turned away again, stepping further out into the sunlight, testing the edges of this world he had placed me in. Because if he thought he was the only one learning something here, he was wrong. I walked farther than I needed to, past the trimmed hedges, past the stone path that curved like it had been designed to guide, not invite. The air felt different out here, less controlled, not free, but closer to it. I kept my pace steady, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving, like if I stopped, the invisible lines around me would become visible again. The grass was too perfect. Even that felt intentional. Nothing here was allowed to grow wild. I wondered if that included people. I slowed near the edge of the property where the trees began to thicken, their shadows stretching across the ground like quiet warnings. That was where the space changed. Not physically, mentally. You could feel it. This was as far as you were meant to go. I did not stop immediately. I took one more step, then another. Testing. Waiting. Nothing happened. No alarms. No voices calling me back. Just silence. But it was not empty silence. It was aware. I turned slightly, glancing over my shoulder again. The house was farther now, but I could still see the glass doors, still see him standing there, exactly where I left him. Watching. Always watching. He had not moved. Or maybe he had, and I just had not noticed. That thought lingered longer than it should have. I looked forward again, toward the trees, the deeper shade, the place where the property ended and something else began. Real world. Uncontrolled. Unknown. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from something sharper. Possibility. I took another step forward. This time, something did change. It was small. Subtle. A shift in the air. A presence. I did not hear footsteps, but I felt them. Not behind me. To the side. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see a figure standing a few feet away, positioned like he had always been there. A guard. Still. Professional. Not threatening. But not optional. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, his voice respectful but firm. "This is the boundary." I looked at him for a moment, taking in the way he held himself, the quiet authority in his stance. He was not here to stop me. He was here to remind me. I glanced past him, toward the trees again, then back at him. "And if I keep walking?" I asked, my voice even. He did not react immediately, did not step closer, did not reach out. "You can try," he said after a moment. "But you will not get far. No threat, no force, just truth." I held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once, more to myself than to him. "Thank you." The words surprised even me. He inclined his head slightly, then stepped back, giving me space again, like the moment had already passed. I turned away from the trees then, my steps slower now, more deliberate, as I made my way back toward the house. Toward him. The distance felt different on the way back. Shorter. Not because the space had changed, but because I understood something now. The boundaries were real, but they were not enforced the way I expected. No chains. No locked doors. Just presence. Awareness. Control that did not need to prove itself. I reached the patio, the glass doors coming into focus again, and this time, when I looked at him, I did not look away first. He had moved. just slightly. Closer to the door now, his posture unchanged, his attention still fixed on me like I had never left his sight. I stepped inside without hesitation, the shift from sunlight to controlled quiet immediate and noticeable. The air felt heavier again. Not suffocating, just contained. I stopped a few feet from him, close enough to feel the difference, far enough to keep my space. There are boundaries, I said, my voice calm, steady. He nodded once. Yes. But you do not stop me from reaching them. Another nod. No. I studied him for a moment, then tilted my head slightly. Why? This time, he did not answer right away. His gaze moved over my face, not searching, not judging, just observing, like he was fitting something into place. Because, he said finally, if I force you to stay, you will always try to leave. I felt that settle in my chest, quiet but heavy. And if you do not? I asked. His eyes held mine, unwavering. Then you might choose to stay. The words hung between us, simple but impossible to ignore. I exhaled slowly, looking away for just a second before meeting his gaze again. You are very sure of yourself. No, he said softly. I am very sure of you. That caught me off guard more than anything else he had said so far. Not because it was confident, because it felt personal. I frowned slightly, trying to understand what he meant, what he saw, what he thought he knew. You do not know me, I said. His expression did not change. Not yet. I shook my head once, a small movement, but enough to break whatever that moment had been building. Then you should not assume anything. I am not assuming, he replied. I am observing. I let out a quiet breath, the edge of frustration returning, but softer now, less sharp. And what have you observed so far? He stepped closer then. Not enough to close the distance completely, just enough to shift the balance again. That you walked to the edge, he said. And you came back. I held his gaze, refusing to look away, even as his words settled deeper than I wanted them to. That does not mean anything. It means everything, he said quietly. And for the first time since I stepped into this place, I was not sure if I was trying to leave anymore, or trying to understand why I had not. I did not answer him right away. Not because I did not have something to say, but because I was starting to understand that every answer I gave him became something he used to see more, to understand more. And I was not sure if I wanted that. I turned slightly, stepping past him again, slower this time, not testing the space, just moving through it, aware of how easily he let me. That was what stayed with me, not what he controlled, what he chose not to. I walked into the living area, my fingers brushing lightly against the back of the sofa, grounding myself in something ordinary, while everything else felt anything but. You think coming back means I want to stay? I said finally, my voice calm but firm. It does not. I heard his footsteps behind me then. Not loud, not rushed, just present, always present. I did not say you wanted to stay, he replied. I turned to face him again, my brows drawing together slightly. You said it meant everything. He stopped a few feet away, keeping that same careful distance, like he respected a line only he could see. It means you are not running blindly, he said. That is different. I crossed my arms loosely, considering that. It was not wrong. And that was the problem. Maybe I just needed to understand the limits, I said, before I decide how to break them. A small pause. Then, again, that almost invisible shift in his expression. Not surprise, not concern, something closer to interest. Then you are already thinking differently than most, he said. I let out a quiet breath, shaking my head once. You keep comparing me to people I do not know. And you keep proving the comparison matters, he replied. I looked at him for a moment, really looked this time, trying to see past the control, past the calm, past the way he held everything in place like it belonged there. What do you actually want from me? I asked. The question came out softer than I expected. Not demanding, just honest. He did not answer immediately. Of course he did not. That silence again. That careful weighing of words like they had weight beyond what they sounded like. Clarity, he said finally. I frowned slightly. About what? About you, he replied. I almost smiled again, but this time there was no humor behind it. That sounds like your problem, not mine. It becomes yours the moment you are here, he said. I exhaled slowly, looking away for a second, my thoughts shifting in a way I was not fully comfortable with. He was not wrong. Again, that was becoming a pattern. I moved toward the window, stopping just short of it, my reflection faint in the glass, layered over the view outside. The same grounds. The same boundaries. Still there. Still unchanged. You said I could decide what to do with the space, I said, keeping my voice even. So what if I decide to ignore you? I heard the faintest change in his breathing behind me. Not reaction, just awareness. Then I will wait, he said. I turned my head slightly, glancing back at him. For how long? Another pause. Shorter this time. As long as it takes. I studied him, searching for any sign that this was a strategy, a tactic, something calculated beyond the obvious. But there was nothing. Just certainty. Just patience. And that was dangerous in a different way. Most people reacted. Most people pushed back. He did not. He adjusted. I turned back to the window, my fingers resting lightly against the cool glass. You are very patient, I said quietly. I have learned to be, he replied. I nodded slightly, more to myself than to him. That made sense. Someone like him did not rush, did not chase. He waited. And eventually, things came to him. Or stayed. The thought settled heavier than I wanted it to. I pulled my hand away from the glass and turned fully to face him again. What if I never give you what you are looking for? I asked. What if you never get your clarity? His gaze did not waver. Not even slightly. Then I will still know more than I did before, he said. I held his eyes, letting that answer sit between us. It was not about winning. Not about control in the way I understood it. It was about knowing. Understanding. And he was willing to take whatever came with that. Even uncertainty. I stepped closer then. Not all the way. Just enough to feel the shift again. The space between us tightening, the air sharpening. And what if what you find is not something you like? I asked quietly. His eyes softened. Just a fraction. Barely noticeable. But it was there. That is a risk I am willing to take. I felt something in my chest shift at that. Not fear. Not trust. Something in between. Something that made this more complicated than it needed to be. I looked at him for a long moment, then shook my head slightly, breaking the connection before it could settle into something deeper. You should not be, I said softly. You do not know what I am capable of. He did not move, did not step back, did not change. Neither do you, he replied. And that stayed with me longer than anything else he had said. Because for the first time, I was not sure if I was trying to prove him wrong or trying to figure out if he was right. The silence after his words did not feel empty anymore. It felt like something waiting. Not for him. For me. I did not move right away. I stayed where I was, close enough to feel the weight of his presence, far enough to remind myself I still had control over my own space. But that control was starting to feel different. Less about distance. More about choice. I looked at him again. Really looked, trying to find the part of him that made sense in a world I understood. The part that demanded, that controlled, that took. But every time I thought I saw it, it slipped into something else. Something quieter. Something harder to predict. You talk like I am supposed to discover something about myself, I said, my voice steady, but softer than before. He did not answer immediately. That pause again. Always that pause. But this time, it felt less like calculation and more like patience. You are, he said finally. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head slightly. I was fine before this. The words came out automatically. Familiar. Safe. The version of truth I had been holding on to. His gaze did not challenge it, but it did not accept it either. Were you, he asked. No judgment. No accusation. Just a question. And somehow, that made it harder to answer. I looked away first this time, my eyes drifting toward the far side of the room where everything was still exactly as it had been when I walked in. Perfect. Unchanged. Controlled. I wrapped my arms loosely around myself, not defensive, just holding on to something I could not name yet. I knew what to expect, I said quietly. That is not the same as being fine, he replied. I swallowed, the words settling deeper than I wanted them to, because they were not wrong. And I was starting to hate how often that was happening. I turned back to him slowly, my expression sharper now, more focused. You think this is better? I asked. Being here? With you? His eyes held mine, steady, unwavering. I think this is different, he said. I let out a quiet breath, almost a scoff, but not quite. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters right now, he replied. I stared at him for a moment longer, then stepped back, creating space again, needing it this time. Not because he was closing in, because something inside me was. I moved toward the staircase, my steps measured, controlled, but my thoughts anything but. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. Not following. Not stopping. Just present. Always present. Halfway up the stairs, I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I just stood there, my hand resting lightly against the railing, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers, grounding myself again. You said I could decide what to do with the space, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the quiet. So, I am going to set a condition. There was a slight shift behind me. Not movement. Attention. Go on, he said. I turned then, looking down at him from the stairs, the distance between us changing the dynamic in a way I did not fully understand yet. But I felt it. You stop watching me like I am something you are trying to solve, I said. And I will stop trying to prove you wrong. The words hung there, simple, but heavier than anything we had said before. He did not respond right away. Of course he did not. That silence again. But this time, it stretched longer. And for the first time, I wondered if I had actually surprised him. He stepped forward slightly, just enough to shift the space between us again, but he did not come closer than that. You are asking me to ignore something I find important, he said carefully. I am asking you to treat me like a person, I replied. No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. His gaze held mine, and for a moment, something in his expression changed. Not control. Not curiosity. Something quieter. Something almost understanding. I have been, he said. I shook my head immediately. No. You have been observing me. That is not the same thing. Another pause. Shorter this time. More focused. Then show me the difference, he said. I blinked, caught off guard again by the shift. What? Show me how you want to be treated, he repeated. And I will adjust. I stared at him, searching for the catch, the angle, the part of this that was still control disguised as something else. But there was nothing obvious. Just willingness. And that was new. That was dangerous. Because it meant the rules were not fixed. They were changing. And I was part of that change. I turned slowly, continuing up the stairs, my thoughts moving faster than my steps now, trying to understand what this meant, what he meant, what I was supposed to do with this kind of control that did not feel like control at all. At the top, I paused again, glancing back down at him one last time. He was still there, still watching, but something about it had shifted. Less intensity, more space, like he was already trying. And that was the moment I realized something I had not expected. This was not just about whether I would leave. It was about whether I would stay on my own terms. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Not because of the noise, but because of what it meant. Space. Mine. Or at least, space I was being allowed to believe was mine. I stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the handle, my thoughts catching up to everything that had just shifted downstairs. Show me how you want to be treated. The words repeated in my head, not as a command, not as a test, but as something else entirely. An opening. And that made it more dangerous than anything else he had done. I moved further into the room, slower this time, my eyes scanning the space like I was seeing it for the first time instead of just passing through it. The bed was still untouched. The window still open to the same controlled view. Nothing had changed. Except me. I walked to the window, my reflection staring back at me again, but it felt different now. Less like I was trapped inside it. More like I was standing in front of something I could still shape. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers lightly against the glass, feeling the cool surface ground me again. If he was serious, then this was not about escaping anymore. It was about defining. I pulled my hand back and turned toward the door again. The instinct to stay up here, to think, to plan, to keep my distance, was still there. Strong. Familiar. Safe. But something else pushed against it. If I wanted control, I could not stay in the space he gave me. I had to step back into his. I opened the door and walked out, my steps steady as I made my way back down the stairs. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. I just moved. When I reached the bottom, he was still there. Not in the exact same spot. Slightly shifted. Like he had been moving, thinking, adjusting, even if I had not seen it happen. His eyes lifted the moment I stepped into view. Not surprised. Not expectant. Just aware. I stopped a few feet away from him. The same distance we had held before, but it felt different now. Intentional. Balanced. I do not want to be watched, I said. No build-up. No hesitation. Just clear. His gaze stayed on mine, steady, focused. Understood. The answer came faster than I expected. No pause. No calculation. That alone made me narrow my eyes slightly. And I do not want to feel like I owe you something just because I am here, I added. Another direct statement. Another line drawn. He did not react the way most people would. No defensiveness. No pushback. Just a small nod. You do not. I studied him for a moment, trying to find the angle, the part of this that would reveal itself as control again. But there was nothing obvious. Just acceptance. That unsettled me more than resistance would have. And I decide what I share with you, I continued. Not the other way around. This time, there was a pause. Not long, but enough to matter. He considered it. I could see it. Then he nodded again. That is reasonable. I blinked, caught off guard by how easily he agreed. You are not even going to argue? I asked. A faint shift in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough to feel it. You asked to be treated like a person, he said. This is what that looks like. The words landed heavier than I expected. Because he was right. Again, I exhaled slowly, some of the tension in my shoulders easing without my permission. Fine, I said quietly. Then this is how it works. I stepped a little closer. Not enough to invade his space. Just enough to make the moment more real. You stop observing me like I am a problem to solve, I said. And I stop treating you like someone I need to escape from. Silence. Not empty. Not tense. Just present. He held my gaze, something deeper moving behind his eyes now. Something less controlled. More human. Agreed, he said. And just like that, something shifted again. Not in the room. In us. The rules were no longer his. They were shared. I did not know if that made things safer or more dangerous. Probably both. I stepped back slightly, breaking the intensity before it could settle too deeply. Good, I said, softer now. I turned away, walking toward the window again, but this time it did not feel like I was checking for exits. It felt like I was choosing where to stand. I could feel his presence behind me, but it was different now. Less focused. Less fixed. Like he was actually giving me the space I had asked for. I rested my hand lightly against the glass again, looking out over the same controlled grounds, but they did not feel as closed in as they had before. Because now, I understood something I had not before. Control was not always about walls. Sometimes it was about agreement. And as I stood there, feeling the quiet shift in the air behind me, I realized something I had not expected to admit. I was not just adjusting to his world anymore. I was starting to shape it. The quiet did not feel the same anymore. It was not something pressing in on me. It was something I was standing inside of, aware of, choosing how to move through. I stayed by the window for a moment longer, my hand still resting lightly against the glass, watching the way the sunlight shifted across the grounds. Nothing out there had changed. The same paths, the same edges, the same limits. But I was starting to see them differently. Not as walls, as lines. And lines could be negotiated. I pulled my hand away slowly and turned back into the room. He was still there, but something about his presence had shifted. It was quieter now, less fixed on me, like he was holding himself back, deliberately, like he was honoring what I had asked for. That alone made me pause. Most people would have pushed, tested the boundary, found a way around it. He did not. He adjusted, and that made him harder to predict than anything else. I stepped further into the room, my movements steady, my attention no longer divided between him and the exits. You said I could speak to the staff, I said. He nodded once. Yes. Then I want to understand how things work here. I continued. Not just where I can walk. Everything. Another pause. Not resistance. Consideration. That can be arranged, he said. I tilted my head slightly, watching him more carefully now. You are not going to ask why. His gaze met mine, calm, steady. You are choosing to engage, he said. That is enough. I held his eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair. That was fair. I moved toward the dining area again, not to eat this time, but to take in the space with a different perspective. The placement of everything. The quiet efficiency. The way nothing felt accidental. This was not just a house. It was a system, and if I was going to exist inside it, I needed to understand it. Who runs this place when you are not here? I asked, glancing back at him. He stepped closer, but not too close, maintaining that same careful distance we had settled into. There is a manager, he said, and a structure. I want to meet them, I replied. No hesitation. No softness. Just clear. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly. Not in opposition. In focus. You will, he said. I studied him for a moment, then folded my arms loosely. You are not concerned about that? Should I be, he asked. I let out a quiet breath, considering my words before I spoke again. Most people in your position would not want someone like me asking questions. A small pause. Then, again, that faint shift. Not quite a smile, but close. Most people in my position would not have brought you here, he said. I could not argue with that. And the fact that I did not try to, that was new. I turned slightly, walking toward the center of the room, my steps slower now, more deliberate. Then maybe you should be concerned, I said quietly. He followed the movement with his eyes, but did not interrupt. Why? I stopped and looked at him directly. Because I am not just going to sit here and exist in your world, I said. If I stay, I need to understand it. Silence. Not tense. Not heavy. Just present. Then he nodded once. Then you will. The certainty in his voice did not feel like control this time. It felt like permission. And that was different. I stepped a little closer again, testing the space, the balance, the way this dynamic was shifting between us. And if I do not like what I find? I asked. His gaze held mine, unwavering. Then you will decide what to do about it. No pressure. No expectation. Just choice. I let that settle, feeling the weight of it, the reality of it. He was not trying to keep me blind. He was letting me see. And that was either confidence or something else entirely. I turned away again, my thoughts moving faster now, not trying to escape, not trying to resist, but trying to understand. That was the difference. I was not reacting anymore. I was choosing. I walked toward the hallway, pausing just at the edge before glancing back at him one more time. He had not moved. Still there. Still watching. But not in the same way. Less like he was studying me. More like he was waiting. And that was when it fully settled. This was not about control in the way I had known it before. It was not about forcing me into something. It was about creating a space where I would decide how far I stepped in. And as I stood there, feeling the quiet shift in everything around me, I realized something I had not expected to admit. He was not trying to make me belong to this world. He was waiting to see if I would choose it. I did not go back upstairs. Not this time. Instead, I turned into the hallway, slower than before, letting my eyes adjust to the quiet details I had ignored earlier. The walls were not just decoration. The spacing, the lighting, even the placement of doors felt intentional, like everything here followed a system I had only begun to notice. If I was going to stay, even temporarily, I needed to stop reacting to the surface and start understanding the structure underneath it. My footsteps were soft against the floor, but I was aware of every movement, every shift in the air around me. Not watched. Not anymore. But still known. That difference mattered more than I expected. I reached the end of the hall where I had seen the staff move earlier, a subtle doorway that blended into the design of the house. It was not hidden, just not meant to stand out. I paused for a second, my hand hovering near the edge of the frame, then pushed it open. The space beyond was different. Less polished. Still clean, still organized, but functional in a way the rest of the house was not. This was where things actually happened, where the system moved. A woman I recognized from earlier looked up from a counter, her expression calm but attentive. The same woman who had shown me my room. She straightened slightly when she saw me, but there was no surprise in her posture. Just acknowledgement. "Miss Carter," she said gently. I stepped inside fully, letting the door close behind me, my eyes taking in the layout, the quiet efficiency of everything around us. "You said I could ask for what I need," I replied. She nodded. "Of course." I hesitated for half a second, not because I did not know what to say, but because this felt like the first real step into something I could not undo. Then I spoke. "I want to understand how things work here." Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened slightly. Not defensive, just attentive. "In what way?" she asked. I moved further into the room, slower now, my fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the counter as I grounded myself again. "Everything," I said. "Who does what? How decisions are made. What I am allowed to do and what I am not." Silence settled between us for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just measured. Then she nodded once. "That is reasonable," she said. "But some things are not mine to explain." I expected that. I nodded slightly in return. "Then start with what is." She studied me for a second longer, like she was assessing not just the question, but the intention behind it. Then she gestured lightly toward a chair near the table. "Sit," she said. I did. Not because I was told to, but because I chose to. That difference mattered now. She remained standing, her posture relaxed but precise, like everything about her had been practiced until it felt natural. This house operates on structure, she began. Everyone has a role. Everyone understands their place. I listened carefully, not interrupting, letting her words settle into something I could map out in my head. And me? I asked quietly. Her gaze held mine, steady but not intrusive. You are undefined, she said. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because it was accurate. And that makes things complicated, she added. I nodded once. For you, for everyone, she replied. That made sense. I leaned back slightly in the chair, folding my arms loosely as I considered that. So what happens when something does not fit into the structure? I asked. Another pause. Then, carefully, it adapts. I let that settle, feeling the weight of it, the implication behind it. This place was not rigid. It adjusted. Quietly. Precisely. Just like him. I stood then, pushing the chair back slowly, my mind already moving ahead, connecting pieces I had not even realized I was collecting. Thank you, I said simply. She inclined her head slightly. If you need anything else, I will ask. I finished for her. She gave a small nod, like that answer was expected. I turned and walked back toward the door, my steps steady, my thoughts sharper now, clearer. When I stepped back into the main hallway, the difference hit me immediately. Not in the space. In me. I was not just moving through this place anymore. I was starting to see it. And once you see something clearly, it is harder to pretend you do not understand it. I made my way back toward the living area, my pace slower, more deliberate, and when I stepped into the room again, he was there. Of course he was. But this time, I did not feel like I was stepping into his space. It felt like I was bringing something back with me. I stopped a few feet away, meeting his gaze without hesitation. It is not just a house, I said. His eyes sharpened slightly. No. I tilted my head just enough to study him differently now. It is a system. A small pause. Then a nod. Yes. I held his gaze, letting the understanding settle between us. And I do not fit into it. This time, something in his expression shifted more noticeably. Not control. Not calculation. Something closer to recognition. Not yet, he said. I felt something in my chest tighten at that. Not fear. Not resistance. Something else. Something that felt like a question I had not asked yet. I took a small step back, breaking the moment before it could go further, before it could become something I was not ready to define. Then maybe that is the problem, I said quietly. He watched me, silent, waiting. And for the first time since I stepped into this place, I realized something I could not ignore anymore. I was not just trying to understand his world. I was starting to wonder what it would take for me to change it. The word problem lingered in the air longer than it should have. Not because of how I said it, but because of how he received it. He did not reject it. He did not correct me. He just stood there, watching, like he was letting the idea settle between us, giving it space to become something real. I shifted my weight slightly, aware of the quiet tension building again, but it felt different now. Not like a wall, like a turning point. You think I am going to adapt to this, I said, my voice steady, but quieter than before. To your system. He did not answer immediately. That pause again, but now I understood it. He was not avoiding the question. He was deciding how much truth to give me. I think you already are, he said finally. I frowned, the words hitting sharper than I expected. Understanding something is not the same as accepting it. No, he agreed calmly. But it is the first step. I shook my head slightly, taking a step to the side, creating space again, but not as much as before. The distance between us no longer felt like protection. It felt like positioning. You are assuming I want to take that step, I said. His gaze followed me, steady, unwavering. I am observing that you already have. I exhaled slowly, frustration rising again, but it was different this time. Less reactive, more focused. You keep doing that, I said, turning everything I say into something else. I am listening, he replied. I stopped moving, turning back toward him fully. Then listen to this, I said, my voice sharpening just enough to carry the weight of what I meant. I do not belong here. Silence. Not immediate. Not empty. Just deliberate. Then, quietly, belonging is not something given, he said. It is something chosen. The words settled deeper than I wanted them to, because they were not about this place. Not really. They were about me. I looked away for a second, my thoughts shifting faster than I could organize them, trying to find something solid to hold on to. And what if I choose not to? I asked softer now. He did not move. Did not change. Then you do not, he said simply. I blinked, caught off guard by how easily he said it. No resistance. No pressure. Just acceptance. That is it. I asked. You just let me decide? A small pause. Then, yes. I studied him carefully, searching for the part of this that was still control, still strategy, still something hidden beneath the surface. But there was nothing obvious. And that was what made it unsettling. You are not afraid I will walk away? I asked. His eyes held mine, steady, calm, but there was something deeper there now. Something I had not seen before. No, he said. Not because he was certain I would stay, but because he was certain of something else. I felt it, even if I did not fully understand it yet. I stepped closer then, not testing, not challenging, just closing the space because it felt necessary. Why? I asked quietly. The question was not about control anymore. It was about him. He looked at me for a long moment, and this time, the silence felt different. Not measured, not calculated, honest. Because you are not here by force, he said. I frowned slightly. That is not true. It is, he replied calmly. You were brought here, but you are still here because you have not chosen otherwise. The words hit something deeper than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, to argue, to push back against that logic, but nothing came out. Because part of me understood what he meant, and I was not ready to admit that yet. I looked away again, my chest tightening slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of something shifting under the surface. That is not fair, I said quietly. No, he agreed. It is not. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. At least you were honest about that. He did not respond. Did not need to. The silence between us was enough. I stepped back slightly, needing space again, but this time it was not to protect myself from him. It was to understand myself. That was the difference. I moved toward the window again, my reflection meeting my eyes in the glass, but it did not feel the same anymore. Less like I was trapped, more like I was deciding. I rested my hand lightly against the surface, feeling the coolness ground me again. You said I could choose, I said, my voice quieter now, more measured. So here is my choice. I turned back to him slowly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. I am not going to pretend this is normal, I said. I am not going to accept it just because it is easier. He nodded once, listening, really listening. But I am also not going to keep fighting something I do not fully understand. A pause. Then, softer, not yet. His eyes held mine, and this time, there was no calculation in them. Just attention. That is a reasonable position, he said. I felt something in my chest ease slightly at that. Not relief. Not comfort. Just alignment. I stepped back again, breaking the moment before it could settle too deeply, before it could become something I was not ready to define. Good, I said quietly. Then I turned away, walking toward the hallway again, but this time, I was not leaving the conversation. I was carrying it with me, because now, the question was no longer whether I would stay or leave. It was something more complicated than that. It was whether I would change, or whether I would change everything around me. The hallway felt different this time, not because it had changed, but because I had. Every step I took now carried intention, not reaction, and that shifted everything. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. I moved like I understood where I was going, even if I had not fully decided what that meant yet. The light from the windows stretched across the floor in long, quiet lines, and for the first time since I arrived, it did not feel like I was walking through someone else's space. It felt like I was moving through something I could shape. I slowed near the center of the hall, my fingers brushing lightly against the wall again, grounding myself in something steady as my thoughts settled into something clearer. This was not about escaping anymore. It had not been for a while. I just had not admitted it yet. I turned slightly, looking back toward the living area where I had left him. He had not followed. He had not called me back. He had not tried to control the moment in any way. And that changed everything more than if he had. I walked back slowly, not because I had to, but because I chose to. When I stepped into the room again, he was exactly where I expected him to be. Not waiting, not watching in that same focused way, just present. Like he trusted that I would come back if I wanted to. And that was the difference now. It was not about whether I could leave. It was about whether I would. I stopped a few feet away, meeting his gaze without hesitation, without the tension that had been there before. It was still there, but it was different now. Sharper. Clearer. You were right about one thing, I said quietly. He did not move, did not interrupt. Just listened. This is different. A small pause, then a slight incline of his head. Yes. I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle before I continued. But different does not mean better. His gaze held mine, steady, unwavering. No, he said. It does not. I nodded once, accepting that. Not agreeing. Just acknowledging. And it does not mean I belong here. I added. Another pause. Then, softer this time, no. I studied him for a moment, searching for the part of him that would push back, that would try to define this for me, but it was not there. He was not trying to convince me anymore. He was letting me decide, and that was more powerful than anything else he could have done. I took a small step closer, closing the space between us just enough to feel the shift again. Not pressure, not control, just presence. But it also does not mean I have to leave, I said. The words came out steady, clear, mine, and for the first time, they did not feel like a reaction. They felt like a choice. Something in his expression changed then. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice. But I did. The smallest shift. Something softer. Something that looked almost like understanding. No, he said quietly. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was full of something unspoken, something that did not need to be defined yet. I stepped back slightly, not pulling away, just creating space to breathe, to think, to feel the weight of what I had just said. Because it mattered, more than anything else so far. I am not staying because of you. I added, my voice softer now, but still firm. And I am not staying because I have to. His eyes remained on mine, steady, attentive. I understand, he said. I believed him. That was new. I turned slightly, my gaze drifting toward the window again, but this time I did not move toward it. I just looked. The same grounds, the same boundaries, the same world, but it did not feel the same anymore. Because now, I was not standing outside of it. I was standing inside it, deciding what it meant. I am staying, I said quietly. The words settled into the space between us, simple but undeniable. Not permanent, not final, but real. For now. A small pause. Then from behind me, his voice. For now is enough. I closed my eyes for just a second, letting that settle, letting the weight of it anchor itself somewhere deeper than I